Hello, community. I am Catherine Jura, a community health educator and your host for this podcast. I have taped a special introduction for this episode to explain the uniqueness of it and why you may find it hopeful and helpful. Many of us find it difficult to recognize and talk about loneliness. In the previously released episode of Will You Be My Neighbor, myself and Kyra Alte, a social worker and director of the Albany NNORC, discussed two topics, one of which was a very deep dive into the topic of loneliness. What it is, what are the different kinds, how normal it can be to experience it, how hard it can be to talk about, and the challenges as well as the hope of creating a life of connection and community. Kyra and I also shared very vulnerable stories about our own periods of loneliness, as well as our professional experiences with the topic. I felt this whole discussion would make a powerfully inspiring and hope-filled standalone episode. So, through the magic of editing, I have created this episode, Loneliness, a Hope-Filled Conversation. Currently, almost all the episodes in our playlist focus primarily on how individuals and one family created the connection and community they needed and wanted. And they are there for you, filled with the many different ways to do just that. This episode is here for you in a different way, to learn all about loneliness, all the topics I have mentioned so far, in a way that is filled with discovery, hope, and inspiration. And don't miss the show notes. You will find many helpful resources for creating connection and community from the original episode, as well as Kyra's bio and information on the Albany NNORC. There may be one in your area. Lastly, in case this is your first visit to Hello Community, I have kept our usual introduction to the podcast, which will be up next, followed by the episode. I am really glad you are here. I hope this is as moving for you as it is for me. Till next time. Hello, community. I am Catherine Jura, a community health educator and your host for this podcast. I created Hello Community in response to the continuing epidemic of social isolation and loneliness being reported across the United States and the world. Prolonged loneliness can cause physical and emotional illness, can make chronic illnesses worse, and can lead to early death. The good news is that social connection and community are significant healing factors for this epidemic. So today's episode is going to be a little different than our previous episodes, where our guests came and told us their stories of how they moved from social isolation and loneliness to connection and community. Today, it's going to be more of myself as a community health educator and our guest, Kyra Alte. Welcome, Kyra.
Thank you.
Kyra is a state licensed social worker specializing in geriatrics, and she has a background in care management. She is also the director of NNORC, NNORC, which stands for Neighborhood Naturally Occurring Retirement Community. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Catherine.
You're welcome. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, well, what is loneliness and what are the different kinds of loneliness, and most important, normalizing loneliness. Shall we start our conversation about loneliness?
Sure.
So one definition that I found of loneliness, and they often all seem to be about this. True loneliness is a subjective feeling of isolation and disconnection that results from a perceived gap. So that's a subjective, personal feeling, a perceived gap between one's desired and actual social connections. So I'll read that again. True loneliness is a subjective feeling, meaning just personal to me, of isolation and disconnection that results from a perceived gap between what I really desire and what I actually have. What do you think about that definition?
I think that is a great definition. And I think, gosh, a subjective, it surely is a subjective experience, right?
Loneliness.
I mean, it can look different for every person. People might be lonely for different reasons, right? That might be different for every person.
Yes.
And I think, yeah, certainly sometimes we all get in our own ways, I think, in terms of perception, right? Whether or not there's, a board across your door not letting you out of the house or not, you might, a person with social anxiety might really feel that board across their door's presence, right? Even though a friend coming over to chat might not necessarily perceive that anxiety, that feeling of loneliness, or that inability to get out the door, right? So it's I'd say a deeply personal experience.
Yes, that's what I loved about that. So we talk about, and you're talking about one of the types of loneliness. So I have 3 types that I'm familiar with. So interpersonal, so that's like close friendships, relationships, more one-on-one, and not having that. So interpersonal loneliness. Societal. So where do I belong? What groups do I belong to? Do I have a cultural group that I feel like I fit in or don't? Spiritual. Do I have a church or a synagogue or a mosque or somewhere that I can go to support my spiritual life that is a community? And it could be, is work a group I fit in? Do I fit at work? So first, the interpersonal, one-on-one, we want that, but it seems like we also want group.
Yes.
Group connection. And then the last one, which is some people include and some don't, is called existential. What is existential loneliness? What is my purpose? Why am I here? And one of my first guests, when I said existential and what it was, he said, "That's it! That's what's going on with me." And it was like, so one of the things, and you could have a combination depending on your circumstances, and that just escalates the perceived gap that we have. So one of the things I liked when you and I chatted was you wanted to normalize loneliness. And we talked about maybe asking our guests some questions from one of your intake forms that I found when I looked at the intake form really powerful. So whichever way you'd like to go at it, whether it's put out some questions that folks could ask themselves to help them determine if they're lonely. Sometimes you don't know you're lonely. You know something's going on, you don't feel, something doesn't feel right. But I've had 2 experiences in my life as I've been thinking about this when I did not have the word loneliness. In hindsight, I know that's now what I was feeling, and that would have helped me work towards healing all of that pain I was in. I didn't have a name for it. I was experiencing tremendous loss, and that's all I knew. But I was also incredibly lonely in that, and that just perpetuated everything.
It can be really hard to see it in the moment.
In the moment. Now I know, but I didn't then. So do you want to start with a few questions to sort of say, hey, I can relate to that. Nope, not that one. And then normalizing that.
Are you part of a religious or faith community? Who do you call when you have an emergency or need a favor? Where do you find joy? Right? These sorts of questions give us a really good idea about what support network exists in a person's life, what their, to use your words, existential sort of situation is, right? Do you feel like you have purpose? Do you get that from connection? Do you get that from a place? Do you get that from, right? And one question, two questions won't cover it. And I think it's to your point that there's sort of these different levels. Like if we think about concentric circles, right, where you as an individual are in the middle, and as we zoom out, it's kind of work, school, government, cultural moment, right? We could go way out into the chronoverse.
Yes, yeah.
I think you're absolutely right that loneliness exists on all of these different levels. One is not more important than the other.
No.
And all of them are important to us at the NORC for better understanding how to support people, what kind of support they need. And we know that social connection is a huge part of quality of life.
So I was fascinated when you just said, do you have joy in your life? And that question, and do you have somebody to call? That those questions help you understand if someone might be experiencing loneliness?
Yeah.
That's what you just shared?
Yeah.
I wanted to clarify that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think...
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. We're social creatures. We evolved in social settings.
Totally.
We need other people. And so understanding loneliness on all of these different levels isn't always simple. And to your point, folks don't always use the word themselves, right? People might not know if you've just suffered a great loss, if a partner has died, right? Or a parent has died, or a sibling. There might be, an overwhelming amount of grief that keeps you from sort of seeing what's immediately in front of you.
Meaning lonely.
Which could be
lonely.
That there's nobody there for you to call and you're feeling really lonely. Yeah. I think loneliness is an emotion that can kind of get wrapped up in or stand right behind another emotion in terms of our perception, if that makes sense. So I think I'm feeling sad, but there might also be loneliness part of that.
Part of that. So I think it's interesting when we looked at my categories, interpersonal, societal, and existential, but now you're sort of more fine-tuning it with questions. That's what I was hoping for, that our guests who are listening or watching might say, do I have joy in my life?
Yeah.
That's not something I personally would have, and if I said no, I might not tie loneliness to that.
Right.
It's the feeling, the question about the joy. If someone says no, I don't.
Yes. Yeah. I might then ask a person in their life what types of activities have brought them joy? Have they had a hobby before?
Okay, that's an intro question, and then follow-up will help you. If it's a no, then you could go a little deeper. So if one of our listening, viewing guests says, no, I don't have any joy, then you might say, can you add a couple more questions for a guest to ask themselves?
So I might ask about activities, hobbies. I might ask about their spirituality. I have no judgment or, thoughts about anyone's religion, but religion is a major way that folks find support. And again, if we're thinking about a human in their environment and a human in their social connections, spirituality is a huge part of that for folks. So from there, I might then be offering NORC programming. I might say, if you liked knitting, 20 years ago, you might want to come to the stitching group at the library with us. Because there's social connection inherently in that, right? They might just like knitting alone, but there is a way to connect a person to a group of people who might find a similar type of joy and a similar type of activity, right? And it's often not until it's in hindsight, in my experience, that a person will then say, the NORC really did help me with loneliness I was experiencing, right? My husband passed away, I was in a dark moment, and when Eva, the care manager, came and offered the stitching group at the library, it really turned things around. I made some friends, I now have activities I look forward to each week, or, reasons to get out of the house,
Oh.
reasons to wake up.
Yes,
Like,
exactly, and get out of bed.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are a couple of other questions?
Did you feel lonely? Do you ever feel left out?
Belonging is a new word to the conversation today. Connection, community are words we use for this podcast. That's where we're aiming. But belonging is another word that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Connection and community say some things to some of us, but belonging, boy, who doesn't get what that means? And when you don't belong,
Yes. Oh,
we know what that feels like.
Painful.
Yeah.
And we know that. It's interesting because I think a difference between the word belonging and the other words we've used is that it kind of goes two ways. It's not just I have someone to call when I need something, but it's I know my community values me. I know people are, need me too, the same way that I need them.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
mutual.
That's mutual. That's really important too.
Yeah, yeah.
So how about you wanted to normalize loneliness?
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Great question. I think loneliness, like so many mental health struggles, challenges that we experience as humans, has a lot of stigma attached to it. I do feel that that's changing, and I am hopeful about that, but I want to, contribute to the normalization that we all, at some point, will experience loneliness, right? It's sort of an inevitable, it's part of the deal of being a human on Earth. And I think, the same way that we'll all likely experience some type of disability at some point in our lives, we'll all, right? Loneliness is just sort of part of the gig sometimes, and I think it speaks to the fact that we are social creatures inherently. And loneliness is not a moral flaw. It is not somebody doing something wrong. It is a really normal feeling. And I think to your point, Catherine, it's about our perception of it, right? So sometimes there are other mental health challenges associated with our loneliness. I used the example of social anxiety earlier.
Yes.
Which is a great one. I certainly have experienced social anxiety myself, and that sometimes is a really isolating experience, especially if you're not sharing it with anyone, right? If you don't call a friend and say, oh, I'm feeling really anxious today. I don't think I can make it to the party, but can we talk on the phone when you leave the party, or something like that. It can be really isolating, and oftentimes the more we feel that loneliness or isolation, the worse it gets. It kind of builds up, right? And that is also a really normal experience. So I think the stigma helps block us from both connecting with other people and getting out of our loneliness. And
the stigma of there's something wrong with me?
Yeah, the stigma of
this isn't normal.
Yeah. The same sort of way I think mental health challenges have a stigma around them societally, right? Maybe not between you and I as community health workers.
Yes.
But it's something I hear from clients or just sort of out in the world often, like sort of same idea as, oh, I'm not old enough for those services. I don't need a nurse. I don't need social programming. I'm not lonely, right? I hear that all the time, and it's a shame because I think some of those folks are lonely, and again, I don't think they're intentionally deceiving anyone. I don't think they're lying, but they might not perceive themselves as lonely.
Like I didn't. I didn't have the word.
Right.
I didn't have the language to call it what it was.
It's kind of a taboo. It's not something we talk about very openly.
No.
Yeah.
We are a little bit better, but across the board, probably not. Because who wants to say I'm lonely?
Right.
Because what does that bring up? There's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
That I don't have this big social network of whatever.
Right. I'm not liked. I'm not popular. I'm not, right. All of those sort of thoughts or beliefs about ourselves might be attached to those. And I'm here to tell you those are not true.
Those are not true.
Yeah, loneliness is a normal experience, and it's something that we can't get out of alone, right? We have programming in the NORC that, some of it is explicitly addressing this, and some of it is sort of more social connection as sort of a bonus of, for example, that stitching group, right?
Yes.
But we also have some programs that are really explicitly tackling or addressing loneliness and social isolation. We have, for example, our nurse educator, Susan, does a program around life reflection using poetry and imagery to support folks in reflecting on their lives. And whether you're 20 or 80, right, that's a meaningful activity, and a lot of the time social isolation comes up in that.
Isn't that something?
And people, oh my gosh, they share beautiful things, but it makes sort of a brave space, a vulnerable space for people to be able to reflect on their own experience of loneliness, to be open and honest about it, maybe even to realize it for the first time themselves, right? Yeah.
And then all you need is, and I think you shared with me that one person shares, and then another person's willing to share, and then you have a room of people crying and admitting and acknowledging, and all through poetry. And they probably thought they were going to write about trees,
right.
But given the space to access the feelings, and one of your programs is poetry.
Yes. And there's certainly grief involved in that, but I think there's also joy involved in that, right? In the crying and the connecting. And not every program has people crying in it.
Yes.
But certainly there's healing in that connection, right?
It's connection. It's getting started. And guests that I've previously had on, and guests that are coming up, and I've done their pre-podcast interviews, I hear that over and over. It is getting started. Taking a risk with our vulnerability to ask, to knock on a door. Taking the first step is the hardest.
Absolutely.
It's just the hardest.
Yeah. And if it's any I don't know, if it's any help to anybody, I hear that literally every day.
Really?
But it's all people who want to connect with each other. So it's funny to hear it as, someone who's removed from this situation, and over here I'm at my day job with the NORC, and it's almost comical, because it's like, well, you're feeling nervous about asking that person for coffee, and you're feeling nervous about attending that program, but you're all in the same boat together. You're
feeling
all
lonely,
seeking connection, and feeling nervous about initiating it. And when in reality, I know Joe over here is going to be thrilled to get the coffee invitation from whoever. Right?
Yes. And it doesn't matter what age you are. It does not matter the age. I mean, I purposely invite folks from all different age groups and backgrounds, and we're all talking about loneliness and how to create connection and community.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome,
this has been
Catherine.
such a blessing. Thank you so much.
It's really been a joy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, if you are looking for some other resources, I would really love to recommend Project Unlonely. These will be in the show notes. Started by Dr. Jeremy Lobel. It is a fabulous website with lots of resources for all age groups and all different ways of getting to unlonely. And I'm very excited to share with you that Hello Community now has a Facebook page. And what I love about the Facebook page is that we can bring so much information to you in a more timely manner in between episodes, and share lots of stuff that might not fit a topic of an episode. And so there will be articles and book suggestions and YouTube shorts to our episodes, actual episodes. And what I'm really hoping for is that some conversations might start in the comment section. So we put up an episode, or I put up an article, and then people start to comment back and forth how they felt about it or some other thoughts. I'd really love to see some conversation start in our Facebook page. There are a couple of Hello Community Facebook pages out there, so I would recommend using the link in the show notes for this episode to find your way there, and then you'll start to recognize our logo, and then you'll just be able to put Hello Community in the search bar on Facebook, and you'll recognize our logo, and you can go right there. So if you found today helpful, and hopeful, please do share this with others, because so many folks are lonely, and so that together we can support each other to lives of connection and community. Till next time. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare professional or mental health provider for any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern.